Before 6 on Water Street in Georgetown, a vendor ladles steaming cook-up rice into a foam box, while the cast-iron clock on the market's tower runs a few minutes slow. In Kitty, a man bails last night's rain from his step with a paint tin because the yard sits lower than the tide outside it. Out past the surf, a rig the size of a small town pumps crude from a seabed few on shore have ever seen. All of this is Guyana, a thin, wet shelf of South America where nearly the whole country lives below the ocean it fishes. In 2019, it struck oil and became the fastest growing economy on Earth. Yet the minibus fare has not moved, the sluice gates still open on the tide's schedule, and the wider world still knows the country mostly by one bad day in a jungle clearing. What follows is Guyana read through 5 things along that drowned ribbon: a tide that empties the land, a coast that holds a whole nation, a pot that carries 6 histories, a clearing the country never chose, and a masquerade that counts the wealth in bands, not barrels. From a few thousand feet, the coast of Guyana reads as one long drawn line. Brown Atlantic on the seaward side, a ruler straight band of green on the other, the two held apart by something too low and too far to see from the air. The Atlantic carries its silt down from the Amazon and stacks it against this shelf, where a strip of cane, rice and town stretches close to 280 miles without a single hill to break it. Almost 9 in 10 Guyanese live down there, on a coastal plain that sits, in many places, at or below the level of the sea at high tide. The green is not land beside the ocean so much as land kept back from it, drained and redrained by dikes and canals the Dutch began laying long before the British governed here. The people who live along it call it simply the ribbon, a name that holds both its narrowness and its length. From this height, the ribbon looks calm and finished, a country at rest on its own edge. Then the camera turns out to sea, away from the green and the towns, toward the one thing in this country newer than the morning, where a light is burning that has nothing to do with the sun. Beyond sight of land, where the water deepens past the reach of the dikes, a production platform stands lit against the dawn, its flare stack burning off gas in a flame that does not gutter when the sky goes pale, a supply vessel holding station alongside it. The first oil flowed here in December of 2019, and by the middle of this decade, the wells offshore were lifting around 645,000 barrels a day, from a seabed few on the coast will ever see. In a 2025 Article 4 mission statement led by economist Alina Carrare, the International Monetary Fund called Guyana's transformation strong and broadening after ranking it the fastest growing economy in the world. And yet the wealth keeps its distance. It arrives by pipeline and tanker, counted in barrels and dollars far offshore, while the coast it belongs to goes on waking at the hour it always has. The flame burns out there all night and day, steady and indifferent, a fortune lifting from the dark. Back on land at the same hour, a single window is already lit. In the seaside ward of Kitty, on the eastern edge of Georgetown, the light comes up grey over low wooden houses set close to the road, and in one of them, a man is already awake. Rain fell in the night, and the water has pooled across his step and into the front room, because the floor of the house sits lower than the sea on the other side of a wall a few streets away. He works at it the way his neighbours do, with an old paint tin, bending and tipping, carrying each tinful out to the drain at the road's edge, while a single bulb burns behind him and the kettle begins to tick on the stove. The water he bales will run in the end to a koker, the Dutch word still used for the wooden sluice gate that lets the land empty out to the Atlantic at low tide and seals the ocean back out when the tide turns. These gates are older than anyone living, older by far than the rigs offshore. The coast has drained itself through them twice a day for the better part of 3 centuries. The man finishes, sets the tin by the door, and pours his tea. Outside, the gate will open when the water falls, on the tide's schedule and no one else's, and by the time it closes again on the rising tide, the rigs will have lifted another day's wealth that no one on this step has touched. The same wall that holds the sea out of Kitty runs east for the better part of a day's drive, and at its far end, on the east bank of the Berbice River, the town of New Amsterdam is already awake. The Dutch laid it out in the 18th century, when Berbice was a colony of its own, with its own governor, and the grid they drew still orders the town today. Straight streets, deep roadside drains, one long market road. Before the first bus, the minibus stand fills slowly. A driver wiping down a windscreen, a conductor calling a half-empty route, the same fares chalked up that were chalked up before the oil. In a yard a few streets back, a woman stands at a wooden table, folding dough for the day's selling, dusting the flour from her palms as the kettle climbs toward a whistle, working in the grey light from the doorway because the current is off again. She will send the first tray out on the morning bus, as she has for years, and the fare that carries it has not moved $1 through all the boom years offshore. The same roads that thread the coast also turn inland, and one of them runs about 65 miles up the Demerara River to the only large town the bush ever allowed to grow. Linden is a place of red earth and haul roads, named in 1970 for Lyndon Forbes Burnham, the man who led the country to independence and governed it for the 2 decades after. The town digs bauxite, the ore that aluminium is smelted from, and it has dug it since 1917, when the first pits opened at Mackenzie on the riverbank, long before anyone offshore had drilled for oil. The bauxite workers of Linden have kept that older economy turning through boom and slump alike. The kilns that bake the ore to a dull red powder, the conveyors, the haul trucks grinding up roads stained the color of the ground they cut. Behind the town, the land opens into what Guyanese call the back dam, the cultivated ground and waterways behind the settled strip, where the farmed land gives out and the forest begins. The billions the capital now counts have changed the figures on a national ledger. They have not changed the shift that starts at the kiln this morning. Pull up from Linden, and the truth of the country shows itself in a single frame. The town and its roads shrink to a scratch on the green, and the green runs on past them in every direction without a road or a roof for hundreds of miles, because more than 4/5 of Guyana is forest, unbroken and mostly roadless, and the people are not in it. Nearly all of them are back on that thin coastal strip, packed a few miles deep against the sea, while behind them lies a wilderness the size of a country with hardly a soul inside it. Why does a whole nation crowd one wet line when a continent stands open at its back? Because the line is where the sugar was, and the drainage, and the lanes out to sea, and because the bush, for most of the country's history, has been a place to pass through rather than to live. The interior is most of the map. The coast is the whole of the address. Step off the ribbon and the asphalt gives way to red laterite, and the smell of salt and silt is gone, traded for the smell of cut bauxite and wet bush. Back in Georgetown, on the open ground the city calls the Square of the Revolution, a bronze figure stands more than 4 meters tall, fists clenched, head turned out toward the coast, raised in 1976 to a man the country knows simply as Cuffy. In February of 1763, on an estate up the Berbice River, an enslaved cooper named Cuffy, Coffage in the spelling his own people kept, led a rising that drove the Dutch off their plantations and held much of the colony for close to a year, with Cuffy himself declaring a governorship over the freed and the fighting. The rebellion was broken, its leaders killed, the old order put back in place by imported troops. But the date survived, and 2 centuries on, a free republic cast it in metal and set it where the morning traffic has to drive around it. Everything the coast now sets on one table traces back to the cane that Cuffy rose against. The peoples who now cook side by side along this coast did not arrive together or freely or by any kindness. They were carried here, generation after generation, to work the same cane. The enslaved brought across the Atlantic, and after slavery's end in 1838, the indentured shipped in from India, from China, from Portuguese Madeira, set down beside the Amerindian nations who had fished these rivers long before the first estate was ever surveyed. Six peoples pressed onto one drowned strip of land by one economy of sugar. 60 miles east, in a New Amsterdam kitchen on the Berbice, the descendants of one of those crossings are already at the stove. A round of dough goes onto a hot iron griddle and blisters in seconds. A pot of split peas ticks beside a pot of rice. The table is laid for a meal that runs straight back to the indenture ships. On the back of the same stove sits a pot that has not been emptied since Christmas. It is pepper pot, the dish the coast keeps for its holidays, and the reason it can stand for weeks on a low flame is one dark ingredient: cassaripe, the bittersweet syrup boiled down from grated cassava, a method the Amerindian peoples worked out long before any ship arrived. A hand lifts the lid, spoons in another measure of cassaripe, lays in fresh meat, and brings the whole pot back to a boil. That daily reboiling is the trick that keeps it from spoiling, so that a single pot carries the same flavor from one Christmas toward the next. Three histories already sit in it: the cassava of the first peoples, the slow meat of the holidays, the hands of the household that keep it alive. Back in the seaside ward of Kitty, the market lanes fill by mid-morning, and on the stalls is the one-pot meal that sets the rhythm of the whole coast. Cook-up rice and pigeon peas, and whatever meat the week allowed, simmered down together in coconut milk in a single pot, the dish the vendor was already ladling out before 6. By the time families sit, flatbread has come from one kitchen, pepper pot from another, and cook-up from a third. It is the food of the indentured and the enslaved and the indigenous, landing on the same plate at the same hour for the plainest reason. The pot was on, and the household was hungry. The motto stamped on the country's seal reads, "One people, one nation, one destiny." And it is argued out 3 times a day at the table. The pepper pot does not ask which history sits down to eat it. It asks only that the pot keep boiling. Inland, though, past the last of the canals where the road runs out, lies one clearing the country has spent 50 years trying not to think about. Northwest of the coast, where the rivers run brown under a closed roof of trees, and the only roads are the rivers themselves, the land lifts a little into the Barima Waini, the region most Guyanese call simply the Northwest. It is Amerindian country for the most part, reached by boat and small plane, its regional town of Mabaruma a scatter of buildings on a ridge above the forest. Somewhere in this region, up a tributary off the Kaituma River, an American preacher named Jim Jones leased a few thousand acres of bush in the mid-1970s and cleared a settlement for the followers of his People's Temple, a congregation he moved here, he said, to build a community free of the troubles of the country they had left. They called the place Jonestown. At its height, close to 1,000 people lived in it, almost all of them American, raising food in cleared ground a long way from any coast. In the one part of Guyana, the sea defenses never reached and never had to. On the 18th of November 1978, the settlement ended in a single afternoon. A United States Congressman, Leo Ryan, had flown in to look into accounts of people held against their will, and as his party tried to leave from the airstrip at nearby Port Kaituma, gunmen from the settlement opened fire and killed him with 4 others. Back in the clearing, in the hours that followed, Jones had his followers drink a fruit punch laced with cyanide. The adults were made to give it first to the children. More than 900 people died that day, more than 300 of them children, in what stayed until 2001, the largest deliberate loss of American civilian life in a single event. The dead were flown home to the United States. Almost none of them were Guyanese, and the clearing had belonged to the country only the way a leased patch of bush belongs to the land it sits in. Yet the word the world learned that week, set beside the photographs of the dead, was Guyana. A nation of fewer than 1 million people, most of whom had never come within 100 miles of the clearing, found its name fixed for a generation to a horror carried in from somewhere else. The clearing itself did not last. Within a few years, the bush had taken back the cleared ground. The buildings rotted or were carried off, and today, little marks the place but a few foundations under the trees, visited now by hardly anyone. Mabaruma and Port Kaituma went on being what they were before the Americans came. Small river towns of farmers and boat hands and traders, where a child still walks a ridge road to school and a family still gathers at a plank table at midday over cassava bread and river fish, the radio low in the corner, the afternoon rain coming on. The people of the Northwest did not choose what happened here, and they do not carry it the way the rest of the world does. For them, the name marks the ground they live on. 50 years on, the country still meets its own name in the mouths of strangers who know only the clearing, and still answers patiently that the clearing was never the country. And down on the coast, where almost everyone actually lives, the nation keeps a different appointment with its name, one it chose for itself every February. Near the Atlantic edge of Georgetown stands an arch of welded steel and concrete, put up in 1966 to mark the moment the country became its own. On 26th of May of that year, after more than a century and a half under British rule, British Guyana lowered the Union flag and raised the golden arrowhead, the green, white, gold, black and red of a new nation, Guyana, the only English-speaking country on the South American mainland. Four years later, on 23rd February 1970, it cut the last formal tie to the crown and declared itself a republic. And for the day that marks it, the country chose a street festival rather than a military parade, naming it with a word borrowed from the Arawak, Mashramani, taken to mean the celebration that follows a hard job done together. The arch has stood through every February since, through the lean decades when there was little enough to celebrate, through the bauxite slumps and the years of rationed flour, and now through the strangest season of all, when an ocean of oil money is arriving offshore while the festival underneath the arch looks, from the street, almost exactly as it always has. Every February, the avenues behind the arch fill with masquerade bands, costumes built on frames of wire and cane, feathered and mirrored and sewn with thousands of sequins, moving to the calypso pushed off the backs of slow trucks. No one buys these costumes. For weeks beforehand, in front rooms and yards along the coast, they are made by hand, and at a kitchen table in one of those houses, a woman bends over a headpiece by lamplight, threading sequins onto wire one at a time, a needle held between her lips between stitches, the costume taking shape on the same table where the family eats. The bands that cross the route can run to several hundred people apiece. And the country that the International Monetary Fund now ranks as the world's fastest growing economy still keeps its truest accounting here. Not in barrels or in figures read out in the capital, but in how many bands take the road and how long the music holds the street after dark. From a few thousand feet again at the end of the day, the coast is the same drawn line it was at dawn, brown Atlantic on one side, the green ribbon on the other, the towns strung along it like beads on a single wet thread. The masquerade is down there somewhere in the green, too small to see from this height. Out past the surf, the flare still burns on the platform, lifting its steady wealth from the seabed. And along the shore, the cokers wait, as they have for 3 centuries, for the tide to fall so the land can empty itself once more. The wealth offshore is real, and it is rising. And what it will finally make of that thin green ribbon, whether it ever reaches the man with the paint tin or simply flares on past him in the dark, is the question the whole coast is living inside and cannot yet answer. Down on Water Street, the cast iron clock keeps its own slow time, a few minutes behind the country it stands in, and waits, as it does every night, for 6 o'clock to come around again. By evening, the vendor scrapes the last cook-up from the pot, stacks empty foam boxes, and starts home along Water Street. The day that began before 6 is over, and the plate costs what it did at dawn. Out past the surf, the rig works through the dark, counting barrels far from anyone who can see them. The tide is falling. Along the coast, the cokers ease open one after another, and the day's rain runs to the Atlantic. What comes next is not yet a verdict. It is a question the coast will answer in drains, fares, wages, and rooms where lights still go out. "280 miles of coast, 9 in 10 below the tide, 6 histories in one pot, and a fortune offshore that no one onshore has touched." The gate opens. The coast empties to the sea. Offshore, the other tide keeps rising.